guys, and welcome to another episode of You Would Think. We're going to be looking at a few things today, and we're going to kind of just jump right in. Alright, so today we are covering the Lindsay Clancy trial that is going to begin tomorrow. A few things on today's video. We're going to take a look at her husband Patrick's statements as to how he feels about everything in the GoFundMe that was set up for the family, which has reached nearly $1 million, I believe, at this point. Then we will look at some of the language and information that is in the civil lawsuits that are being brought by Patrick against her doctors. So not the criminal, but the civil. And that was the paperwork I had linked to my previous video yesterday. Only this puts it in a little more digestible fashion. So we can take a look at that. Because this is going to be really the core of this trial. Then we have I'm having a brain fart. Then we have another timeline. It's a little more specific than the previous one. We have the prosecution asking the judge if to sequester the family from the courtroom before they testify, which is general practice. But he denied that request, and they're allowed to sit in the courtroom from start to finish, even though they'll be testifying. Kevin Reddington also made a request that Lindsay Clancy be able to leave the courtroom when pictures of her children and graphic images and the 911 call are played. The judge denied that, which I truly think was maybe the right course of action. You tell me. And then there is an interview with a criminologist regarding these types of cases that deal with, mental issues and the insanity defense. She is going to be having an interview with Nate Eaton from the Courtroom Insider. He is actually where I got the background information I'm about to show you. So I will link his page in the description as well. You can go check him out. He will also be covering the trial, and that's what we have for you today.
A GoFundMe was set up for Patrick, and you can see this is the photo with the 3 children, including baby Callan. And an official statement from Patrick asked for a plea of forgiveness and understanding. More than $1 million has come in to this page with 16,000 people donating. This is what Patrick said. The following are the words of Patrick Clancy from today, January 28th, 2023. So he says, "Thank you for all your love and support. The warmth I've received from the community is palpable, and your generosity gives me hope that I can focus on some sort of healing. I've seen all your messages and contributions, including some from people I haven't seen in over a decade and many I've never met. I see and appreciate every one of you. A lot of people have said they can't imagine, and they're right. There's absolutely nothing that can prepare you. The shock and pain is excruciating and relentless. I'm constantly reminded of them, and with the little sleep I get, I dream about them on repeat. Any parent knows it's impossible to understand how much you will love your kids until you have them. The same goes for understanding the devastation of losing them. Cora, Dawson, and Callan were the essence of my life, and I'm completely lost without them. My family was the best thing that ever happened to me. I took so much pride in being Lindsay's husband and a dad to Cora, Dawson, and Callan. I always reminded myself that each day with them was a new gift. Callan usually woke up first and would rest his head on my shoulder for a few minutes as he adjusted to the morning. Dawson typically sang or spoke his thoughts out loud for a while before we'd go get him. Cora was a big girl and would simply walk downstairs. I can still vividly picture her coming into the living room each morning with her hair in a mess, smile on her face. We always started our days together, reading books, cuddling up on the couch, and playing with magnet tiles. I loved taking them places, whether it was scooting at Chandler Elementary, vacation skiing out on the boat, or to Duxbury Beach, one of our favorite places on earth. They gave me purpose, and I never took it for granted. There is now a massive void where that purpose once was. He goes on to say, I want to share with you some thoughts about Lindsay, his wife. She's recently been portrayed largely by people who have never met her and never knew who the real Lindsay was. Our marriage was wonderful and diametrically grew stronger as her condition rapidly worsened. I took as much pride in being her husband as I did in being a father and felt persistently lucky to have her in my life. I still remember the very moment I first laid eyes on her and can recall how overcome I was with the kind of love at first sight you only see in movies. It really didn't take long before I was certain I wanted to marry her. We said I love you to each other multiple times daily, as if it were a reflex. We habitually started every morning with a passionate hug, yielding a sign of relief, like we had each received the perfect medicine. If too much time passed without a hug, she'd look at me and ask, "Did you forget?" We mutually understood the reality that people can have bad days, but we stuck to the rule that when one of us got lost, the other was always there to bring them home. Always. She loved being a nurse, but nothing matched her intense love for our kids and dedication to being a mother. It was all she ever wanted. Her passion taught me how to be a better father. I want to ask all of you that you find it deep within yourselves to forgive Lindsay as I have. The real Lindsay was generously loving and caring towards everyone, me, our kids, family, friends, and her patients. The very fibers of her soul are loving. All I wish for now is that she can somehow find peace. I promise I'll put all my energy into healing and rediscovering my purpose. I owe that to all of you.
So that is definitely some very strong words that are probably going to have a very large effect if they are allowed in this criminal trial. Now we'll take a look at the more detailed timeline of that day.
3. In the morning, Lindsay Clancy took her 5-year-old Cora to a doctor's pediatrician's appointment. Interacting with the nursing staff and doctor, nothing was alerted unusual in her behavior. Then they returned home to play outside in the snow with Cora and 3-year-old Dawson. They built a snowman. She texted photos of the children to her mother and husband. At 4:02 p.m., Clancy searched Kids Miralax on her cell phone, then Takeout 3V, and used Apple Maps to check the drive time from Duxbury, where they live, to 3V, which is a restaurant in Plymouth. 4:47, she called a CVS in Kingston asking about children's Miralax. 4:53, she texted Patrick, who was working in the home office in the basement, "Any chance you want to do takeout from 3V? I didn't cook anything. It's been a long day." Prosecutors say it was unusual for them to get takeout food so far from home. At 5:10, called 3V to order takeout, sent Patrick out to get the medicine from CVS and the food. At 5:32, security video shows Patrick arriving at the CVS in Kingston. 5:33, he calls his wife. She called back a minute later and confirmed which medication to buy. He later told investigators she, quote, seemed like she was in the middle of something. That call lasted a few seconds. 5:54, security video shows Patrick arriving at the 3V. He paid and he left. At 6:09, so less than an hour, From the call to 3V, what is it, 5:10, 6:09, Patrick arrives home to silence. He found the bedroom door locked. He opened it. He saw blood on the floor and an open window. He ran outside and found his wife injured on the ground with wounds to her wrists and neck. She was conscious and talking, though. He asked her, "What did you do?" She replied that she tried to kill herself by jumping out of the window. He called 911. On the call, he asked, "Where are the kids?" She replied, "In the basement." At 6:10, Duxbury police dispatched to the home for a reported attempted suicide. Officers found Lindsay Clancy breathing and semi-conscious. Patrick entered the home to check on the children. Officers then heard screaming, and Patrick reportedly yelled, "She killed the kids." I imagine that body camera footage will be shown during the trial. Cora and 8-month-old Callan were found on the floor in the basement den area. Dawson was on the floor of his father's basement office. How could you ever go in there again? Patrick told investigators all three had workout bands tied around their neck. Prosecutors say Patrick removed the bands from the children's neck after the 911 call and attempted to resuscitate them. Lindsay was taken to South Shore Hospital in Weymouth with broken bones in her back and rib cage. The children went to Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital in Plymouth. Callan was later med-flighted to Boston Children's Hospital. At 7:28, Cora and Dawson were pronounced dead. And a few days later, Callan died of his injuries on January 27th at the hospital. In an October 2024 New Yorker profile, Patrick said, "I wasn't married to a monster. I was married to someone who got sick." Now, prior to this happening, Lindsay said that during her first pregnancy, she had anxiety that was tied to an abnormal ultrasound finding that was later resolved. She was diagnosed with postpartum anxiety. It was mild, and she returned to work part-time.
Now, I can appreciate the mental health aspect of things. I'm still just finding it hard to get over the mapping out of how long it would take to get to the restaurant and to get to CVS and then back home. I just feel like it's a very strong argument for premeditation, but I'm not a doctor, and there may be other explanations. We'll just have to wait and see. So now we have a little bit of the civil suit that Patrick is bringing against her doctors. Again, I linked the full report in my previous video. In this one, though, Nate is going to kind of just, give us that more digestible fashion and kind of read some of the more relevant parts. Now, this is not going to come into the trial because it is a civil suit. It is completely separate from the criminal charges, and they cannot intertwine. So this will not come necessarily into the criminal trial, but this information is documented other places. So I have no doubt that they're going to call her doctors to the stand in some way, shape, or form. But here's a little bit of the language in the civil suit against her doctors brought by Patrick, her husband.
Postpartum episodes, including following Dawson's birth. There were critical indicators that should have alerted competent psychiatric providers to the risk of bipolar disorder and the potential for more severe postpartum psychiatric complications following subsequent pregnancies. She gave birth to Callan on May 26, 2022. They took parental leave. She demonstrated significant activation and hypomanic behavior, including an extensive program of exercise beginning only 1 week after delivery. She woke every day before the children at 4 a.m., ran 3 miles, did spinning for 30 minutes on the Peloton, and then 30 minutes of aerobics. On January 4th, 2022, only 5 weeks after delivery, she ran a marathon. During Lindsay's first pregnancy with Cora, she experienced anxiety due to an abnormal ultrasound finding that was later resolved. She experienced some anxiety during the postpartum period, but returned to part-time work and breastfed for 1 year without incident. During the postpartum period following her second child, Dawson's birth, Lindsay was initially elated with increased energy. Patrick described that she, quote, had manic behavior for multiple days. In October 2020, she had an episode of decluttering to simplify her life, obsessively cleaning and discarding items. She said she felt amazingly on top of things. Her thoughts raced and she constantly felt pressure to be active. After the second pregnancy, anxiety emerged at approximately 2 months postpartum. Although Lindsay was offered Zoloft by a prescription, she declined due to concerns. And then it goes on to say that Lindsay Clancy did everything a mother in her situation could do. She recognized something was wrong with her. She sought medical treatment. She went to emergency rooms. She called crisis hotlines. She admitted herself to hospitals. She took the medications prescribed to her. She communicated her worsening symptoms to her providers. Of her normally sensible personality, per her sister. Her mood switched suddenly to anxiety and depression at roughly 12 weeks postpartum. So she found and scheduled an appointment in 2022, and on the EPDS, which is the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, she scored a 23, which indicates severe depression. Tufts prescribed Zoloft. Lindsay waited 2 weeks before starting it. She was concerned because she was breastfeeding. Then she had an adverse reaction after her dose was increased from 25 milligrams to 50. She went 48 hours without sleep, racing thoughts, and worsening anxiety. So the Zoloft was discontinued. And she took the Zoloft from September 22nd to January of 23. Ativan and Benadryl was given to her for sleep. On November 16th, there was an ER visit at South Shore Hospital for insomnia, anxiety, heart palpitations, and she was prescribed trazodone, which was ineffective. Then, 5 days later, nurse practitioner Julie Paul prescribed her Prozac. She discontinued after 4 days when it intensified her insomnia, the second antidepressant that caused those same side effects. 3 more meds were prescribed at once: Ambien, Remeron, and Klonopin. After Remeron, she reported disassociation. She felt disoriented, forgetful, disconnected from her body. She was unable to drive or be alone. So she began treatment with a nurse around November 29th, who prescribed her Seroquel. December 2nd, she described losing 15 pounds. She had no appetite. She had panic attacks and was confused. She reached out for help on December 4th, calling the New Bedford Suicide Hotline. She was told that it wasn't an emergency because she had no specific suicide plan. On December 6th, Patrick told the nurse that Lindsay is, quote, 10,000 times worse since she's taken medication, and he asked to start everything over. The nurse acknowledged a medication mix-up was possible, but continued increasing the Seroquel toward 400 milligrams a day. On December 5th, a crisis support clinician told her she didn't meet the criteria for inpatient care. On December 15th, Patrick reported Lindsay, quote, had the worst day. She had hallucinations all day, every day, saying, "You are damaged. You will never be the same. My only option is to die." December 20th to 21st. There's an ER visit at Mass General. She's admitted to the partial hospitalization day program at Women and Infants Hospital. Their chief complaint, she felt numb and crazy and depressed. She admitted herself to McLean Hospital December 31st, 2022 into New Year's Day with depression and suicidal ideation. She was placed in a locked unit but reportedly didn't see a doctor for 3 days and was discharged on January 5th of 2023. All of this, again, comes from the lawsuit. Mid-January of 23, hallucinations reportedly return. The lawsuit says a voice told her, quote, "You will never be the same. The only option is to die." The day before the killings, January 23rd, a doctor increased her antidepressant dose. Follow-up appointments reportedly lasted no longer than 17 minutes each.
So there is clearly no question that this woman was trying to get help. She was going to different doctors. She was taking the medications. She was noting that when she felt abnormal, she was clearly trying to get help. And I think that this is going to be, again, the core argument of this case, is this was a woman suffering, and it seemed like anyone she went to, doctors, psychiatrists, inpatient hospitalization for 5 days on January 1st, and then January 24th, she kills her kids. I mean, she was trying. So we'll see how that develops. Now we have, like I had mentioned in the beginning, the prosecutor wanted the family out of the courtroom, so they could not watch the testimony until they testified, which is general practice. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a Massachusetts thing. I'm not sure. You can tell me. But the judge denied that request. So the family is going to be able to sit in the courtroom and hear all the testimony and before they testify. And this was the comments by the prosecutor to that ruling.
Ask that they be sequestered until after they testify. We've tried to meet with these witnesses, the defendant's parents and her sister. They have refused to meet with us for trial prep, so I can't tell you when or if I'm definitely going to call them. I kind of have to see how things go as the trial progresses. But the information that they would testify to, whether called by myself or defense counsel, would go to the heart of the defense. They would be talking about her behavior leading up to the murder of her children and the things she said and did. And I wouldn't want them even unintentionally influenced by each other or other people. So I'd ask that they be sequestered until after they testify.
She has a completely valid argument, because if you're going to sit in the courtroom and listen to all of the testimony, then you could be, even if you're not meaning to be, you could be influenced by what you hear other people testify to. So it's very strange that the judge denied that request and allowed them to stay in the courtroom to hear testimony before they testify. It's also interesting that the family is not cooperating with the prosecution or Commonwealth. Obviously, you can understand why, but the complete and utter just not working with them whatsoever, I don't know. I just feel like that's a bit trivial. But next, Kevin Reddington, her defense attorney, had requested that, Lindsay be able to leave during the graphic testimony in the 911 call. The judge denied that as well. And here are a few comments after that ruling from Kevin Reddington to the press.
Nature standpoint, I wouldn't want anyone to have to be in there to look at gruesome photographs of little babies slaughtered and cut up and butchered and autopsy photo. No, but that's what they want to do. So that's part of a trial. We'll make a decision if she's going to have to sit there through it.
These comments struck me as just a little odd, because nowhere in the indictment, in the case, in any of the media coverage of this case, are babies butchered and cut up, or whatever else he says, slaughtered. They were strangled with exercise bands. So I just found those comments to be very strange. And now is the interview that Nate Eaton has with the criminologist regarding a little bit about this case and the mental components and things of that nature.
Jordan. She's a criminologist, behavioral analyst, attorney, and host of the podcast Criminal Appeal. Dr. Jordan, so good to see you. Thank you for being here tonight on Courtroom Insider. So the defense isn't disputing that Lindsay Clancy killed her kids. That's not the issue here. How does that change the fact that they're only focusing on her mental state when they present this case to the jury?
As most of your listeners and viewers are going to know, a crime is really made up of several components. And you've got, as your corpus delicti, as we like to call it for those junior lawyers out there, you've got the criminal intent, the criminal act, and then the concurrence. And the criminal intent is everything in this particular trial, because they're claiming that because she was laboring under such a disease or defect of the mind that she couldn't understand right and wrong or lacked substantial capacity to understand that. You know, Massachusetts used a little bit of a mashup between the McNaughton rule and the substantial capacity test. She could not form the intent to kill her children. And I think, Nate, she's got a really good chance of prevailing on this from either two different aspects. You know, the medication, the over medication, the bad cocktail of all of these pharmaceuticals that she was on. So although they're not using the words involuntary intoxication because that's a little bit different, she was under the influence of pharmaceuticals, that she was under the care of medical people. They provided this to her. And the other aspect, if that doesn't work, or it doesn't have to be an either or, it could be as well as, is going to be postpartum psychosis. And Nate, I've got to tell you, I've covered a lot of these cases of infanticide by mothers, especially who have killed children in the first year after the last baby was born. I've covered many of these going back to Andrea Yates 25, 26 years ago. And I think this one is one of the most solid cases I have ever seen, where a woman is most likely, if I were on this jury, knowing what I know so far, not guilty by reason of insanity based on that postpartum psychosis.
Interesting. Her husband wrote a very passionate message on a GoFundMe page that now has over $1 million raised. And he said that he's forgiven his wife. He asks people to forgive her, and he's going to testify on her behalf, or at least he's on the defense list. How much will that play into jurors? The fact that her husband, who lost 3 of his children, is standing by her.
I think it's going to be incredibly important because, remember, these were his children too. So the tragedy that he suffered, just knowing the details of him coming back from that, run to the restaurant to get the takeout food. And he comes back and he discovers his wife has jumped out a window in a suicide attempt, and she's laying outside on the ground, severely injured. And then while struggling to deal with that reality and call 911 and get an ambulance there to assist his wife, he goes looking for the children and finds them all in the downstairs area of their home, all dead. The shock, the trauma that he must have gone through with that series of events is more than most people can fathom. But for him to come out of that and say, on the other side of that, the woman who killed my children and jumped out of that window obviously was not the woman I married. This is not the Lindsay Clancy that we all know and love. She was absolutely not in her right mind. For him to believe that and not to blame her for killing his 3 children shows a man who has done a lot of introspection. It's not just a matter of being educated, it's a matter of being aware of all of the confluence of variables that could lead to such a tragedy. If he is able to understand that the woman who killed his children and jumped out that window was not in her right mind, was not the same woman who exchanged wedding vows with him just 6 or 7 years before, then we need to listen to the same reasoning that he's listened to come to that conclusion. And I truly think, Nate, that him being a witness for the defense, it's not about forgiveness, it's about understanding. Understanding, again, all of the circumstances and variables and factors that led to that perfect storm of homicide. If he can understand it, then we need to make an equal effort to understand it as well.
Yeah, it's going to be, I imagine, a powerful testimony when he takes, when he takes the stand. All right, so let me ask you about Massachusetts using this. It's called lack of criminal responsibility standard. What does the defense have to prove versus what people might assume the insanity defense is?
Okay, well, insanity defense is different in every single state. And I would encourage your viewers and listeners, get online and Google insanity defense by state to see the wide variation of how different states apply and allow the insanity defense. Idaho, as you know, doesn't even allow it anymore. It's the only
Right.
state that's just like tough cookies. You're on your own.
Yep.
Other states, and if I can give you a little history lesson, going back to 1843, we developed what we called the MacNaughton Rule, which we borrowed from England, which was the first time in England where the insanity defense was raised, and a man who was probably, in modern terms, schizophrenic, who had tried to assassinate the Prime Minister of England, Sir Robert Peel, and the voices pointed out the wrong guy, and he ended up shooting Peel's secretary, but he thought he shot the Prime Minister. I mean, he was laboring under such a disease or defect of the mind so as not to appreciate the nature and consequences of his act. Or if he does know, we call it the right-wrong test. So everybody understand there's usually two options. In some states, there's a third, but your two options for the insanity defense are the MacNaughton Rule, which we call the right-wrong test, and it's very black and white. Do you know right from wrong? Yes or no? If you do know right from wrong, do you know what you did was wrong? Yes or no? Do you understand that people on the outside of society think that what you did was wrong? Yes? Okay. So it's very black and white, dichotomous. Yes or no? You understand right versus wrong. That's it. This is, over the years, modified through a number of cases that didn't cleanly or perfectly fall into the right-wrong test. It is morphed or developed or evolved into what we now call the substantial capacity test. And we call this also the Modern Penal Code Test, MPC, but I'll call it substantial capacity. Now, instead of it being black and white, right versus wrong, think of your ability to reason and understand right and wrong, or the nature and consequences of your act. Think of it, Nate, as like a jar that can be half full, half empty, go up or down. Your ability to reason is not constant. It's not dichotomous. Sometimes you're really able to see things clearly and know right from wrong, but then under, I don't know, circumstances of shock, circumstances of mental illness, circumstances of pharmacological intoxication, even if there were drugs prescribed to you, your ability to reason could be diminished. And in that moment, while your ability to reason and to understand right versus wrong is diminished, you might act in a criminal way, but you lacked the intent. All right, sorry for the long intro, but Massachusetts uses a mashup, if you will, of these two rules. It's very distinctive to Massachusetts. And it essentially says, are you able to commit what looks to be a crime but lack criminal responsibility? I like this, believe it or not. It says that for a variety of reasons, you may not be criminally responsible, but it is essentially using the substantial capacity test and opening it up to a variety of circumstances that could lead to your not being criminally responsible. I think in this particular case, where the details are so complex and the history of her mental struggles is so rich and her reaction to various drugs is so across the board and her treatment by different medical professionals. Okay, she knew she was struggling with mental illness. So now we have to figure out, is she criminally responsible because she did her best to get help?
So I think this was an excellent interview. It went over a lot of the technical aspects of the case. It reiterated the over-medication and the fact that she was under a doctor's supervision and she was trying to get help. I think those are going to be the two most important parts of this trial, because all of us or any of the people that need to see mental health providers, You know, or even just regular doctors. You go to a doctor because they're doctors, and that gives you this comfort that they know what they're doing. Don't question them, just do what they tell you to do. So what do people do? They do exactly what their doctors tell them to do, some of them. And there needs to be accountability in that relationship between a doctor and a patient, because things like this can happen. People have been known to commit suicide. People have been known to commit homicides. I mean, you name it, based on not getting the proper care that they thought that they were getting from their doctors. So at what point does it become where she is criminally responsible solely? You know, where's that line that's drawn? This will be a very interesting trial. Again, it starts tomorrow. I'm going to cover bits of it, and thank you all for joining me for this episode of You Would Think. I hope everybody has a blessed day, and we will reconvene tomorrow.